very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Pradhan Singh, for the privilege and the honor of addressing such an elite gathering. Electricity as a conceptual subject. The meaning of electricity, I'm taking a slightly, opening my remarks with a broader view, struck me first when I was reading in the course of the books that you mentioned. It just struck me while you were mentioning the books. When I was doing my research, and particularly when I was reading texts of the 13th century, 14th century, particularly the Persian texts, the imagery, and this should have struck me when I was studying Shakespeare in college as well, the imagery that is used in the language by way of metaphor, by way of its synonym, by the construct of language, is remarkably different from the imagery used in the post-electricity age. The minds that were functioning, brilliant minds, no doubt, were far, in a sense, conditioned by nature. Nature was much closer to people before electricity changed the meaning of our life patterns and life cycles. Right? In a poetic sense, there may actually have been a slight loss. But in terms of creating a civilizational breakthrough in the habitat and the living conditions of mankind, there are only two inventions in history that really were absolutely revolutionary, evolutionary, dramatic. One was the wheel and the second was electricity. There was a pre-wheel era of human civilization and a post-wheel era. And I don't need to elaborate for this audience what it meant. And there is a pre-electricity era and a post-electricity era. Electricity changed, created life after sunset. Our food habits, our eating habits, of course, whenever I go abroad, I find they still live in the pre-electricity age because they're still eating dinner at 6 o'clock. Right? You eat dinner at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, only if you don't have electricity. But it is so deeply ingrained. Their darkness used to come at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So they would have to have dinner before that and sleep early. But electricity had this fundamental, but the real power of electricity was not merely in changing food habits. Electricity is absolutely essential to the most important development in the history of mankind, and that is the democratization of knowledge. The democratization of knowledge is not possible without the availability of life after working hours, the availability of light after working hours. Otherwise, you cannot transgress. You have to have leisure during the day, which 90% of the world did not have. And therefore, darkness was not only a natural reality, but also an intellectual reality. There was no scope for upward mobility that only knowledge can bring. And therefore, life on this earth was condemned to substantive and substantial poverty before electricity. To bring, I hope that was comprehensible enough, but to bring that forward into our own experience, the experience of modern India, the experience of our whole freedom movement. What is freedom? Freedom, yes, it is freedom from foreign rule. Of course there is freedom from foreign rule. After all, if you want to understand the difference between the pre-British era of India and the post-British era of India, and the British era of India, and then the post-British era India, you have to look at one statistic. This statistic is not, I haven't picked it up from either Piyush's ministry or indeed from the publicity department of the Planning Commission. This statistic is available, and I hope that book is in your library. Paul Kennedy's The Rise and Fall of Nations. Paul Kennedy is an author, teaches at Yale right now. In 1750, 1750 is important, it's 7 years before Plassey. By the way, why did Europe come to India? Please get one thing very clear in your mind, nobody comes to conquer a poor country. The cost of conquest must be worth the return. Nobody wanted to conquer the deserts of Arabia before oil turned up. India was one of the richest countries in the world, that's why the world came to conquer it. Or tried to conquer it. In 1750, India had 24% plus of world manufacturing output. That means one good out of every 4 was made here. China actually had 30 at that time. Britain had 1.8% or something like that. In 1947, Britain had 24%, we had 2. That is the meaning of colonization. So when the great generation of India led the freedom movement, they had to provide an answer as to why precisely we wanted an end to British rule. And this answer was given by the greats of the Indian free movement through very good books, Dadabhai Naoroji's book and so on and so forth, in explaining. Netaji himself explained the economic means of colonization, but I will translate it into the basics, which Gandhiji was brilliant at communicating. The basics of life for the most of India boiled down to roti, kapda, makan, and which we know of, but the fourth was bijli. The meaning of roti is not understood. I'm sad to say. It is not understood by the middle classes. It is not understood certainly by the elites. British Empire began in famine. In 1765, actually the British rule really starts in 1765 with the grant of the Zamindari of Chaubish Pargana after the Battle of Buxar. Between 1765 and 1770, 1/3 of the population of Bengal, that time Bengal was much bigger, as you know, Bihar and Odisha, 1/3 of the population of 30 million died in famine. Famine was a constant fact all through British rule, Lagan. And when the British were leaving, just before they left, 4 million more Bengalis died in famine. I often asked myself, why don't we have a memory of famine? The Irish had a potato famine in 1850 or something thereabouts, still haven't let anyone forget it. We don't remember it. We don't remember it because we didn't die of famine, the poor did. And the poor did not have scribes. Only kings and queens had scribes. But a national movement is not just for the elite or for the national movement is there. Ironically, the freedom movement answered the demand for cloth before it answered the demand for food. Because Gandhiji's great khadi actually created a cottage industry for cloth. For the first time, the peasant could actually create cloth by his own means. And then came the first challenge of our freedom movement, the first of our freedom as a free country, as a free nation. The first challenge before India of 1947 was the challenge of famine. You reminded me of journalism. I still remember when I was in school and the urge to write was even stronger than my ability to write. But even in school, I went out and the very first story that I did for the junior statesman, and then the statesman also, they carried something. It was a statement on famine in the state that I am very privileged to represent today, Jharkhand, in Ranchi and Chota Nagpur. And I still remember writing about the memory of long rows of people, soup, balti mein dal ke sabko diya jata tha. And two iconic figures, one of whom I checked with the other day, he had forgotten. I saw a young photographer taking pictures. His name was Raghurai. And I saw a nun, personally stooped, vigorously, pouring food in one. That was Mother Teresa. So famine was very much a part even of our growing up experience. But it is one of the great successes of our country and of our free nation, that we have put famine behind us. We have not yet put hunger behind us. Make no mistake about that. Make no mistake about that. We are still talking of people. We take the statistics lightly. 30%. 30% below the poverty line. You know what the poverty line in this country is. Poverty line is the age of subsistence. 30% of the country, 30% adds up to 450 million people. Kabhi soch to lein what it means. But roti, kapda, the great challenge for me is of makan, housing and electricity now. Because without electricity in every village, we will not be able, the end of poverty will not come merely because we wish it. The end of poverty will come through knowledge. And the spread of knowledge is utterly diminished without the availability of light. The iconic scenes of villagers in Bihar, young people going to the railway station to study, is there part of our experience still. So electricity is the great challenge, and you are in charge of that challenge. You are the officers of that challenge. Because if we do not get electricity right, we will not get the country right. We will not get the future right. We will not get our economy right. We will not be able to be where we can reach in the 21st century. And this brings me to the Prime Minister's vision. If you see two of the most important things that were his themes of the whole campaign, and now themes of his governance: Bijli, Makan. Housing projects. What are smart cities? Essentially, basically spreading a home for everyone by 2022. Critical, that he's repeated this vision all the time. And after that, Bijli, Makan and Bijli, Makan and Bijli, Makan and Bijli are the two themes. So you are one of the major instruments. Your success, I shall not use the word failure because it isn't available in the Prime Minister's dictionary. But your success is absolutely critical. If you want to understand where he is going, and I can give you one thing, the little that I know of him, there is nothing that he does without thinking it through, without creating his vision is not a vision which is open-ended. His vision is structured within a programmed. And as time evolves, the pieces of it, which may be lying separately, begin to come together. If you want to understand where he is going, go back to the very first speech he made in Parliament. I wasn't in Parliament then. Very first time he entered. But I was listening on television. And even I was a little sort of taken aback when he made that statement at the age of poverty alleviation. Ki bhai, usse nahi chalega. I could see almost the kind of semi-shock on people's faces. Ki bhai, kya sun rahe hain? And then came the decisive line. The age of poverty alleviation is over, the age of poverty elimination has begun. Let us not be content with statistics. If, it is estimated, there were no exact figures, that the number of people below the poverty line in 1947 was about 60. Today we say 30. Let's say the optimistic statistic. If it has taken us 67 years or 7 decades to bring it down from 60 to 30, is the nation ready to wait for another 70 years before you may take it from 30 to 0? I'm glad you say no. It is not ready. The young are not ready. They will not wait. We have to do the deliveries now within the next decade. And this is a national endeavor. Governments will come and go, but India will last forever. And this is the promise that if we don't, our generation does not do it, then we have failed the future. We have already lived lives which are far beyond the comprehension of our parents. We've had very good existences compared to what they went through. But if we don't create a future for our children, for our grandchildren, then we have failed them utterly, despite having the liberty and the ability. Not merely the liberty, there are nations who have got liberty but don't have the ability. I'm not naming names, but they don't have the ability because they're structurally wrong. Their bill confused nationalism with various forms of sectarian emotionalism, with even religious emotionalism. But we've got it right. We've got it conceptually, intellectually right. We've got it morally right. We are a nation in which everyone is equal. We are a nation in which Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, every single person. The term secularism has always been in some kind of a debate. One of the reasons for it is because secularism is a Western word, which doesn't always fit into the Indian experience. Our secularism is not the secularism of Voltaire, which is the separation of church and state, or indeed the secularism of Karl Marx, which is the elimination of religion from the state. Elimination religion altogether. Religion as the opium of the masses. India's secularism is something quite different. It is the equality of every faith, not only before the law. The law can be what it is. The equality of every faith in social behavior. That is the greatness of India. India is today a secular constitution not because Gandhiji was secular. Gandhiji was secular because India is secular. And has been from the time of our Shastras. Has been when it defined the concept of the family and the nation as a family of beings. That is why I say I am so proud to belong to a country which has what I call audible secularism. What is audible secularism? This is the only nation in the world, the only nation in the world, the only nation in the world where you can get up in the morning and hear the azan, followed immediately by the sound of temple bells from a Hanuman temple, followed after that by the part of Guru Granth Sahib. In the same mahalla, followed after that, if it's a Sunday, with church bells. In the same mahalla, and nobody can stop anyone from what I call audible exercise of his faith. You can go to Washington and do your namaz. Just try doing the azan in Washington and come back and let me know if the Baltimore police have been kind to you or not. So we have got it right. What we don't have as yet right is the ability to convert the promise of India. We've gone a long way. I don't want to be a pessimist. I've come from a very small kasbah called Telnipara, which is a jute mill kasbah. And I've seen even today, the workers don't get more than 5,000, 6,000 rupees a month. Right? Because laws have been, practices have been changed to deny them. However, so I know we have not fulfilled the promise that we could have achieved, but we shall do it. Now, what is the answer to poverty? Look, as long as people are on the edge of hunger, we have to have positive discrimination programs. Let's be very clear about that. Nobody can stop it. Because we are not a civilization if a child can go hungry at night. But that is not an answer. The answer to cancer is not a band-aid. The answer is jobs. And you have to create jobs down the line. Jobs is the elimination of poverty with self-respect. That is the power of a job. It is self-respect. It strengthens you. It gives you dignity. It eliminates the indignity of helplessness. And those jobs have to be created at the down level. That is why these massive schemes, after all, skilling is an educational policy. And jobs, jobs, jobs. People look at, there's however number of smart cities may come up, 100, 50, whatever is practicable and so on. But in addition, there are 500 urban areas which are going to be upgraded. There is now 400 railway stations which are going to be the economic hubs. Work will start. I don't have to explain to you what the processes of governance are because you are government. But work will start. All of us see this as urban renewal, see this as this and see this as that. But for me, the biggest repository of jobs is construction. Each one of these projects, one of the problems with the IT industry, is that while there may be 100,000 crores of investment, but the number of actual jobs it creates as a per unit of investment is horrifically low. But construction for the same 100,000 crores or 100,000 crores or 100, right? The return in terms of jobs for the poor is absolutely explosively positive. And that is the drive that is taking us and the nation and our commitments forward. When we think of government, particularly these days, our attention has a tendency to get diverted by television's daily display of what is happening in Parliament. But the very fact that you are continuing your work despite what is happening is proof enough that much positive life also goes on, despite the tensions that are deliberately generated or, accidentally, whatever the reason might be. I don't want to get into political positions here. This is not also the appropriate place for it. But irrespective of what happens, the purpose of governance goes on. Or as the Prime Minister once said to a group, सब ठीक है, सब चलता है, जमहूरियत में, डेमोक्रेसी में सब चलती है, लेकिन अपना धर्म है काम. रोज उठ के 14 घंटे, 18 घंटे जितना है, आप काम करते रहिए, and we will achieve what we set out to achieve. And in that achievement, I am privileged to be here because you and your success is going to be the principal driver of this vision, of this goal, and of the process which will take India a leap forward into the front ranks of the 21st century. Thank you very much.